Welcome back to History 1302. This is the first of what probably will be many videos covering the Vietnam War. The Vietnam War is in many ways very difficult to cover in a survey class like this because it spans so much periods of time. It spans 5 different presidents. So it's really hard to put in any one particular bit of chronology, which is why we kind of pull out and talk about Vietnam War all by itself. But really the best thing to think about in terms of the Vietnam War is that it really is the product of the Cold War. And remember, keep in mind that lecture we did over the Cold War, the domino theory, the Truman Doctrine. All of these things are going to come into play that are going to force American policymakers to do some pretty questionable policies. So let's take a look at it. The Vietnam War. So the country of Vietnam, once known as Indochina, was a colony of the French. And after or part of World War II, various colonial territories began forming independence movements. So in 1941, the Viet Minh is an organization that forms to begin to work towards Vietnamese independence from the French. In 1945, September of 1945, a leader of the Viet Minh, Ho Chi Minh, who is a communist, who went to school in Russia and in Paris. Ho Chi Minh becomes the leader of the Viet Minh and the push towards Vietnamese an independent Vietnam away from the French. Now, at this point in American history, the American government seems to be siding with Ho Chi Minh and his push towards independence because there is this kind of global movement at the end of the war, at the end of World War II, to get rid of colonial territories. So this is kind of in that in-between time, 1945, before the Cold War ideology fully takes place. But by 1950, so we have the Indochina War between the Vietnamese who want independence and the French began in 1946. The United States does not join the effort until 1950, when Truman does basically a 180 on his entire policy and decides that it is in the United States' interest to fight against communism anywhere it exists, and it exists right now in this Indochina War. So the United States offers military assistance, very few boots on the ground. Most of it is economic assistance. The French soldiers are going into battle wearing American uniforms, American hats, right? So we are financing, and sometimes up to 80% of the war with the French. For the most part, it's 1/3 of the finances. So it's pretty significant financial commitment here. Finally, after an incredibly brutal battle of Dien Bien Phu, 1954, the Vietnamese people and France signed the Geneva Accords, which will split Vietnam at the 17th parallel. Ho Chi Minh and the communist forces will take North Vietnam, and South Vietnam will elect a government. And according to the Geneva Accords, North and South Vietnam were going to work together at some point in the future to reunify. So that date was kind of put off. Someday later, we're going to put this country back together. But for right now, it's split at the 17th parallel. 1955, Ngo Diem is elected president of South Vietnam. My pronunciations of Vietnamese words are terrible, if you haven't noticed. And the United States is going to support Diem as president. He is pro-West. He is anti-communist, so he says. And so he is going to be the leader of South Vietnam. Now, he's been appointed excuse me, by the French emperor. He has few allies in government itself. And in many ways, he is a bit of an outsider, even in terms of his religion. He is Catholic, and most of Vietnam are Buddhists. So even in terms of like culture, Diem is a bit of an outlier. The people of his government, 1963, the Buddhist protest. All right, sorry, let me back up a little bit on Diem. Between 1954 and 1956, the United States and the CIA got very friendly with Diem, and he turned out to be pretty competent at maintaining power within South Vietnam, which gave the CIA confidence that Diem would be able to maintain power against communist North Vietnam. So when, for example, in 1956, when he refused to hold elections that he had promised, the CIA decided to back him up. Now, this was a huge moment in the Vietnam-United States relationship for a couple of reasons. Number one, the most important, is the reason why he does not hold elections in 1956 is it was pretty clear that Ho Chi Minh would have won the national election and would have united all Vietnam under communism. So here, the United States is actually fighting against the clear will of the people. The people of Vietnam wanted Ho Chi Minh as their leader. The United States, because of their Cold War policy and all things communist are bad and all things non-communist is good, refused to let that happen. So Diem used that support from the United States to try to keep South Vietnam as a separate country. And Ho Chi Minh became increasingly angry. So in 1960, Ho Chi Minh is going to initiate the Vietnam War by attempting to invade South Vietnam. Ho Chi Minh argues that South Vietnam had refused to honor the Geneva Accords when they refused to hold the elections. Remember, the Geneva Accords stated that they need to try to attempt to unify North and South Vietnam at some point. At this point, this is President Eisenhower, and Eisenhower promised to help South Vietnam win the war. And so when Kennedy takes over as president, this is kind of the situation that he is dealt with. He has dealt with a situation where the United States has basically said it is our official position to help Diem stay at power at all cost. And so Kennedy's big mistake was he convinced himself that Diem could win the war and therefore public support if he had United States backing. Kennedy thought the only problem that Diem had was a military problem and he needed military help. What he failed to understand was that Diem was not popular, was incredibly unpopular. This is a very key moment, and so there's a lot of comparisons between the Vietnam War and the Korean War. Both of these wars are in the Cold War era. Both of them have a split. North is communist, South is not. Here is the key distinction. In Korea, South Korea came to the United Nations, came to the United States and said, please help us at this point. Help us defend our nation, and we did. Vietnam never does that. The United States just continuously inserts itself into Vietnam politics. Kennedy is going to do so by sending 15,000 military advisors to help. to help Diem and get going. And near the end of the Kennedy administration, one of the big turning points is a Buddhist protest in South Vietnam between May and June of 1963. Buddhists to protest Diem's harsh treatment of Buddhists. Remember, he's Catholic and he did not tolerate freedom of religion. Buddhists were literally lighting themselves on fire in protest. Kennedy sees this and understands finally that Diem was not a good guy. And so in November of 1963, the CIA supports a group of South Vietnamese military generals in a coup against Diem. Diem and his brother were killed. It's not clear whether or not the United States was directly involved in the murder part, but they certainly support it. The organization was certainly not all that ready to protect Diem, right? So even if they knew about it. Now, Diem's assassination happens right on the heels of Kennedy's own assassination. And so now we have our third president involved in the Vietnam War, President Johnson. And this is when things take on really a whole new level for the Vietnam War. And it starts, we'll kind of skip ahead a little bit, because it starts with the incident in August 1964 called the Gulf of Tonkin. I'm going to switch off this. You know what? All right, here's the Gulf of Tonkin. Okay, in early August, Johnson announced that American destroyers on patrol in the Gulf of Tonkin had been attacked by North Vietnamese. Later information indicates that the administration might have not been entirely accurate with the reporting of what happened. It might have been trying to create or an exaggerated act against America. It might have been a ploy just to get us involved in this war. But at the time, nobody knew that there was anything wrong, and no one even questioned Johnson's portrayal of the incident. And so by unanimous vote in the Congress and almost a unanimous vote in the Senate, Congress passed what's called the Gulf Tonkin Resolution, which authorized the presidents to take, quote, all necessary measures to protect American forces and to prevent further aggression in Southeast Asia. All necessary measures. So what does this mean? This means that Johnson can do whatever he wants in Vietnam. This is open-ended legal authorization to escalate the war any way he wants to. So in 1965, because of this, in February, Johnson starts bombing North Vietnam directly, and he will continue intermittent bombing from 1965 all the way to 1972. Bombing begins, I'm sorry, I said February. Bombings begin in April of 1965. By 1967, we're dropping 500,000 tons of bombs and 500,000 troops in Vietnam. Now, the war does not go as Johnson had planned. It kind of continues to get worse and worse and worse. So Johnson agrees in 1968 not to run for president, and so it clears the way for Richard Nixon to run for president. Now we have, what is that, our fifth president involved in this? Now, Nixon ran on a campaign that basically says, I have a secret plan to end the war. And I will tell you more about Nixon's secret plan. By the way, it's never a good idea to vote for a politician that has secret plans. Here is Nixon's secret plan in the next video to end the Vietnam War.